I was born Florence Jean Miles, became Florence Emmett when I married Damien in 1979, and remained that person until 3 weeks ago, the day after we buried him. I'm 70 years old with arthritic hands that still remember how to bake the sourdough bread my son Arthur used to beg for on Sunday mornings, and the way my daughter June's hair felt when I braided it for elementary school. I'm telling you this so you understand that before everything collapsed, I was simply a mother who believed she had raised good children. Damien's cancer took 14 months to kill him. Pancreatic, the silent executioner that gives you just enough time to put your affairs in order, but not enough to actually live with the knowledge. We kept it quiet at first, just between us. Our children were busy with their own lives. Arthur with his financial consulting career in San Francisco that seemed to require him to miss every major holiday. And June with her perpetually failing wellness businesses in Las Vegas that somehow always needed another investment from Dad. They don't need this burden yet, Damien had said, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, the morphine making his words slur slightly. Let them live their lives a little longer without this shadow. I nodded because I loved him, but I knew better. I knew our children. When they finally arrived at our ranch-style home on the outskirts of Reno, Nevada, the same house where they'd grown up, where Damien and I had built Emmett family vineyards from 20 acres of sun-scorched soil into one of the most respected organic wineries in the state, they didn't come with comfort. They came with questions about the will. "Mom, I'm just trying to be practical," Arthur said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he'd perfected after his first six-figure bonus. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Damien asleep upstairs, when he first broached the subject. "The medical bills must be piling up. Have you two considered downsizing? The business can't be easy for you to manage alone." Arthur had left Nevada at 18, declaring the desert a wasteland for people with ambition. He'd visited only when absolutely necessary, usually staying at a casino hotel rather than his childhood bedroom because the dust aggravates my allergies. But suddenly, during his father's final weeks, he developed a profound interest in the family business that had embarrassed him throughout his adolescence. June arrived 3 days later, bringing with her 6 suitcases and the scent of expensive failure. 5 wellness ventures in 8 years. Each one launched with her father's money. Each one abandoned when it required actual work. But she hugged Damien with genuine tears and slept beside his bed the night before he passed, which is why I still struggle with what came after. The funeral was small, just as Damien would have wanted. He was buried on a hillside overlooking the vineyards where the summer grapes were just beginning to swell. I stood between my children as they lowered him into the ground, Arthur's arms stiff around my shoulders, June openly weeping into a monogrammed handkerchief I'd never seen before. "He's at peace now," the pastor said. And I wondered if that was true or just something people say when someone dies after long suffering. Damien and I weren't religious, but we'd maintained the social convention of occasional church attendance. Enough that Pastor Ruiz knew to focus on Damien's love for the land rather than any heavenly reward. What I remember most about that day was the silence afterward. The house echoed with it as people dropped off casseroles and spoke in hushed tones about Damien's kindness, his integrity, how he'd helped old Mr. Hernandez save his cattle ranch during the drought or employed the Lopez boys when they needed summer work. Nobody mentioned how he'd built our business from nothing while raising 2 children who seemed to have inherited none of his values. I made up the guest rooms. I told Arthur and June that evening as the last visitors left. "I thought we could spend tomorrow going through some of your father's things together." "About that, Mom," Arthur said, setting down his whiskey glass with a precision that reminded me of his father. "June and I have been talking, and we think it's best if we settle things quickly. We both need to get back." "Settle things?" "The estate," June clarified, scrolling through her phone. "The house, the business. Arthur and I need to figure out the next steps." I'd expected grief from my children. What I got instead was a boardroom meeting. Arthur opened his laptop on the dining table where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their graduations, their departures. Dad spoke to me about this last year, he said, not meeting my eyes. He was worried about you managing alone. The business needs modernization, investment. The house is too much for someone your age. My age, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. I've managed this vineyard alongside your father for 40 years. And you've done wonderfully, June said in the same voice she used when selling overpriced detox teas. But it's time to think about your future, Mom. A retirement community would give you friends. Activities. I have friends. I have activities. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. This is my home. It's all of our home, Arthur corrected. And Dad left the business to June and me in the will. He wanted us to take care of you, but he knew the business needed younger management. I stared at my son, this stranger in designer sunglasses, who thought he knew anything about the earth that had fed him, the vines his father had nursed through drought and frost. Show me the will. He slid a document across the table. Not our family lawyer's letterhead, but something printed on Arthur's corporate stationery. Damien's signature looked wrong. Too perfect, too steady for a man whose hands had trembled with pain for months. You had him sign this while he was on morphine. The rage that rose in me then was something primal, something I hadn't felt since I'd chased a coyote off our property with nothing but a shovel when the kids were small. He was lucid, Arthur insisted. He wanted us to have a fresh start. There's a developer interested in the land. For a luxury resort, June added, her eyes bright. They'll pay $10 million. Mom, we can all start fresh. Fresh. As if the life Damien and I had built was something stale. As if the legacy of Emmett family vineyards, our sustainable practices, our refusal to sell to corporate distributors, our annual donation of 10% of our harvest to local shelters, was nothing compared to the prospect of a golf course for wealthy tourists. Your father would never sell this land for development, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I didn't sign anything. You didn't need to, Arthur explained. The business was in Dad's name. The house too. Nevada isn't a community property state. I knew then they had planned this long before Damien fell ill. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as I lay awake in the bed Damien and I had shared for 43 years. The sheets still smelled faintly of his sandalwood aftershave beneath the sterile hospital scent that lingered after his long illness. Downstairs, the murmur of Arthur and June's voices slithered up through the floorboards like poison. How many times had June called these past months? Not to ask about her father's pain levels or if I'd eaten that day. Only ever. Did Dad sign the refinancing papers? When will you meet with the estate planner? I needed time. We'll discuss this tomorrow, I'd told them at the kitchen table, watching Arthur's fingers fly across his laptop keyboard, working on their future while his father's body still cooled in the ground. But there would be no discussion. By dawn, the smell of overpriced Kona coffee, the kind Arthur had brought from San Francisco because our local blend was swill, crept under the bedroom door. I dressed slowly, my swollen knuckles fighting every button. The weight of what my children had become settling in my bones like desert frost. They were waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a navy blue suitcase I'd never seen before. We packed some essentials for you, June chirped, her manicured hand patting the bag. Arthur and I thought we'd drive you to look at Sierra Sunset today. It's a lovely retirement community near Tahoe. I walked past them to the percolator, pouring black coffee into Damien's favorite mug, the chipped one from the '89 Grape Festival. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Mom, be reasonable. Arthur's Rolex glinted as he checked the time. The paperwork's done. We close with Platinum Acres in 5 days. When I turned, really looked at my son, I searched for any trace of the boy who'd followed Damien through the vines at sunrise, begging to learn how to test bricks levels. All I saw was a stranger in a $3,000 suit. I need my medication from the bathroom, I said quietly. And I'd like to take some photos. Of course. June's relief smelled like Chanel No. 5 and dishonesty. Take whatever you want. We'll send the rest later. I moved through the house like a ghost haunting its own life. My palm catching on the banister Damien had stripped and stained every 5th anniversary. like clockwork flow. Fingering the sun-bleached quilt my mother made the winter I was pregnant with Arthur. Lingering at the window seat where I'd read the Grapes of Wrath to them during monsoon season. In the medicine cabinet, behind the morphine bottles I'd kept as grim souvenirs, I pried open the falseback Damien had built after the '92 break-in. My passport and birth certificate slid into my bra with the $1,200 emergency cash. The fireproof box hidden behind Damien's flannels, still holding the faint musk of his sweat, contained the original deed to 20 acres of the most fertile land in Nevada. The parcel we'd bought before we married. The one in my name. When I returned downstairs, Arthur was drumming his fingers on his briefcase. Ready. I let June take my arm, her grip tight as a jailer's. The leather seats of Arthur's rented Lexus sucked at my thighs as we pulled away from the only home I'd ever loved. Through the rear window, I memorized the gnarled Zinfandel vines Damien had nursed through the '98 drought. The crumbling adobe shed where we'd made love the day Arthur was conceived. The stone well where June had dropped her favorite doll at age 4 and Damien had spent hours fishing it out. When Arthur turned onto the loneliest stretch of County Road 27 instead of the highway toward Tahoe, I didn't flinch. This is where you get off, Mom. The engine idled as Arthur reached across me to pop the door. The house and business are mine now. June's gasp was theatrical. Arthur, what we discussed, he snapped. She'll fight us every step. This is cleaner. The desert air smelled of creosote and betrayal as I stood on the gravel shoulder, watching my children drive away. June's face, pale as a grub under a rock, was the last thing I saw before they disappeared in a cloud of alkali dust. I adjusted my bra strap where the deed pressed against my ribs. They'd left their mother to die in the desert. They'd chosen the wrong woman. The dust settled like a shroud behind Arthur's rental SUV as it vanished into the Nevada heat. The silence that followed was worse than the engine's roar, a hollow, yawning thing that seeped into my bones. My fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. Some cheap nylon thing June must have bought on her way out of Vegas. It smelled like chemical lavender and regret. 5 miles to a gas station. Arthur had said it like he was doing me a favor. Like he hadn't just dumped his 70-year-old mother on the side of a desert road with nothing but a purse and a stranger's clothes. Like he wasn't my son. The sun drilled into the back of my neck, but the fire in my chest burned hotter. I'd birthed that boy in the summer of '82, 16 hours of labor in a Reno hospital with no AC. Damien had held my hand the whole time, whispering about how we'd teach him to prune vines, how we'd take him camping in the high Sierras. Neither of those things ever happened. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. I knelt in the gravel, knees popping, and unzipped my purse. The arthritis in my hands made me fumble. The same hands that had pulled Arthur from my body, that had braided June's hair before school, that had kneaded sourdough every Sunday because it was the only meal they'd both eat without complaint. Now they shook as I dug past the orange pill bottles. 3 things they didn't know I had. My passport, wedged behind a decades-old photo of Damien and me at the county fair. We'd hidden our passports in a slit I'd cut into the lining after the '92 break-in, back when the vineyard was just starting to turn a profit, and we kept cash in a coffee can under the sink. Damien's idea. Never know when you'll need to run, Flo, he joked. I hadn't laughed. $1,200 in 20s, folded inside a grocery list in Damien's looping handwriting. Eggs, flour, honey rays, dog food, Bud's arthritis kind. Dated 2 days before the diagnosis. Before the doctor said pancreatic, and the world tilted. Damien had pressed the cash into my palm that night. Hide it, he'd said. Just in case. He'd always been better at expecting the worst in people. Even our children. The deed. Yellowed at the edges, notarized June 14th, 1978, 3 months before we married. 20 acres in my maiden name. Florence Jean Miles. The original parcel. The one with the artesian well that made the rest of the land worth anything. The water rights Damien had insisted we keep separate, in case the business goes under. I traced the raised notary seal with my thumb. They'd planned this. Not just after Damien got sick, but before. The forged will, the developer's calls Arthur thought I didn't hear, the way June had suddenly started asking about Dad's plans for the land last Christmas. The heat blurred the road ahead, but my vision was crystal clear. They'd picked the wrong woman to abandon. The walk. 2 hours. That's how long it took to reach Miller's Gas and Grocery. My funeral flats grinding pebbles into my blisters with every step. The desert stretched endless and indifferent, sagebrush, red dirt, the occasional buzzard circling something dead. I thought of Damien's joke. Nevada doesn't kill you, it just watches you die. The bell jingled when I shoved open the store door. Ray Miller looked up from his crossword, his tan face going slack. Florence. His eyes dropped to my suitcase, the dust caked on my shins. Hell's bells, what happened? The words stuck in my throat. How do you say my children left me to die, without sounding like a fool? Phone, I croaked. Ray didn't ask questions. Just led me past the jerky display to the cluttered office where Bud, his ancient border collie, lifted his head from a frayed dog bed. The rotary phone had a Be Kind Rewind sticker on it. Vincent Hargrove answered on the second ring. Florence, he breathed. Thank God. Arthur filed a will yesterday. Something's off. The signature. Meet me at your office, I said. And Vincent, bring the original 87 trust documents. I hung up before he could reply. On the wall, a faded photo showed Ray and Damien at a long-gone rodeo, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Damien's smile was the same one he'd given me the day we bought the land. All hope and sunburn. Ray pressed a cold Coke into my hand. You need a ride somewhere? I swallowed the syrupy sweetness, the caffeine hitting my empty stomach like a spark. Just into town. As his truck rattled down the highway, I stared at the deed in my lap. The ink was faded, but the words were ironclad. Florence Jean Miles, sole owner. Arthur and June had the house. They had the business name. But without these 20 acres? Without the water? They had nothing. And I was just getting started. Vincent Hargrove's office smelled like pencil shavings and bourbon, with undertones of the peppermints he sucked to fool his wife about his drinking. The ceiling fan wobbled overhead, casting jumpy shadows across the forge while he'd slid toward me. Arthur's corporate letterhead glaringly out of place against Vincent's scarred oak desk. This is a forgery, Vincent said. His finger, knobby with early arthritis, tapped the signature line. Damien's hands shook too bad by February to sign anything this clean. Look at the tail on the E. Your boy didn't even try to mimic the tremor. I didn't need to look. I'd spent 14 months watching cancer steal Damien's strength, stroke by stroke. The last time he'd signed his name, a permission slip for June's latest investment. It had taken 3 tries, the letters spidering across the page like they'd been written during an earthquake. And this clause, Vincent's yellowed nail scraped over a paragraph near the bottom. All assets transfer to Arthur Emmett and June Emmett Wright, including marital property. He whistled. Bold. A laugh clawed its way up my throat. Sharp, ugly, the kind of sound that used to make Damien squeeze my shoulder in warning at dinner parties. Nevada's a community property state, Vince. Our 87 trust says any disputed assets freeze until probate. Vincent's eyebrows shot toward his receding hairline. You remember that? I remember everything. From my purse, I pulled the deed. The paper crackled as I flattened it on the desk between the whiskey stains and coffee rings. 20 acres. Water rights. In my name only. Vincent's breath hitched. Christ flow. The original parcel. Platinum Acres can't build their resort without this land, I said, tracing the survey lines Damien and I had drawn after closing, drunk on cheap champagne and cheaper dreams. And my children can't sell what isn't theirs. By midnight, we'd made our first strikes. Frozen the business accounts at Nevada First National. Harold Winters, the branch manager who'd baptized Arthur as a baby, didn't blink when I showed him the withdrawal records. $65,000 gone 3 days before Damien's funeral. June's debts, I said. Harold's mouth tightened. He'd been at the funeral. Had seen June's brand new Louis Vuitton handbag. Filed an emergency injunction citing NRS 155.097. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. Vincent slapped the paperwork on the judge's desk at 8:03 a.m. By noon, a notice was taped to the vineyards gate. Emmett Family Vineyards operations suspended pending investigation. Called Martin Adams, the agricultural extension agent, who'd helped us navigate the '98 drought. Those protected desert springs, I reminded him. The ones on my 20 acres? I think Platinum Acres Survey missed them on their environmental impact report. Martin's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I sat in Vincent's office, sipping tepid coffee, watching the fax machine spit out confirmation after confirmation. The hum of bureaucracy, of justice grinding its wheels, should have soothed me. Instead, I kept seeing Damien's face that last morning, the way his eyes had darted to the bedroom door when Arthur stopped by with paperwork. Just tax stuff, Dad. I'd brought Damien his morphine, held the straw to his lips, and when Arthur left, Damien had gripped my wrist with what little strength he had left. Check the safe, he'd rasped. I should have known then. Arthur called at 2:17 p.m. Mom, what did you do? His voice shredded through Vincent's speakerphone, all banker's polish stripped away. I pictured him in his rented Tesla, June hyperventilating beside him, their developer's deal crumbling like overbaked shortbread. Protected your father's legacy, I said. You froze our accounts. The judge gave me 72 hours to prove the will's a forgery. I let the silence stretch. I only need 24. A muffled sob. June. Mom, please. I'll lose everything. Funny, I said, watching Vincent's paralegal wheel in a box of files. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. Vincent mouthed 30 seconds and pointed to his computer, a news alert from the Reno Gazette. Elder fraud allegations rock local vineyard. Sophia Delaney, the reporter who'd written our anniversary piece last year, had moved fast. I hung up on Arthur's spluttering. Phase 2? Vincent asked. From my purse, I pulled Damien's old Rolodex. The card was frayed at the edges, the phone number crossed out twice with updates. Robert Wilson, real estate litigator. Damien's college roommate. Time to call in the wolves, I said. The desert wind carried the scent of burning sage the morning I took back my home. It smelled like justice. I stood at the end of our driveway, watching the sunrise paint the vineyard in streaks of gold and crimson. The same way Damien used to describe the colors in his favorite Zinfandel. The locksmith's truck idled behind me, his radio crackling with the local news. Fraud allegations involving prominent developer Platinum Acres. Arthur's car was gone. He'd fled to some Vegas high-rise hotel the moment the Reno Gazette story broke. But June, my soft, spoiled June, had stayed behind, convinced tears and apologies could still fix this. I knew the exact moment she realized they couldn't. The sound of her scream when the new deadbolt clicked shut reverberated through the screen door. Mom. She pounded on the thick oak Damien had installed after the break-in. Let me in. My stuff's in here. I sipped my coffee black, the way I'd drunk it since my 20s, and watched through the window as she yanked at the handle. Her manicure was chipped, her usually glossy hair pulled into a greasy ponytail. The Louis Vuitton suitcase she'd brought sat abandoned in the dirt, one wheel broken. Your stuff? I called through the glass. Like the $65,000 you took from the business account? Or the jewelry box you emptied from my dresser? Her face crumpled. I was just borrowing. The house is in the '09 trust, June. Always was. I set my mug on the sill. Ask your brother. He's the one who forged the will that tried to steal it. The paralegal's email had come through at 3:17 a.m., a forwarded chain between Arthur and Platinum Acres VP of Acquisitions. Subject, timeline. Arthur. Need to move before she notices the water rights clause. Dad's too far gone to care now. VP. 72 hours after death or deals off. Attached was Damien's death certificate and signed with a sticky note. Fill in date time. Sophia Delaney from the Gazette had cried when I showed her the emails. She'd been at our 40th anniversary party, had written a glowing piece about Reno's first family of wine. Now her pen was a scalpel. Her article hit the front page with a photo of Damien in better days, holding up a cluster of Tempranillo grapes. The headline, Dying Wish or Deadly Deceit. Developer accused of colluding with son to defraud widow. By noon, the story had legs. The DA's office opened an elder abuse investigation. Nevada First National froze Arthur's personal accounts pending fraud review. Platinum Acres stock dropped 11% after Robert Wilson filed suit on behalf of all defrauded Nevada landowners. I sat at Damien's old roll-top desk, fielding calls from reporters while watching the chaos unfold on CNBC. The ticker at the bottom read, Platinum Acres CEO steps down amid scandal. Robert's voice had been steady when he called. They'll settle, Florence. And when they do, those 20 acres will be worth triple. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the voicemail June left at 2:45 a.m., her voice slurry with vodka. You were always so mean to us. Always choosing the stupid vines over. Beep. I deleted it. The locksmith was testing the patio slider when Arthur's Tesla screeched into the driveway. He emerged like a thundercloud in a $3,000 suit, his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what the board says. Then he saw me. For a heartbeat, just one, I saw the boy he'd been. 6 years old, trailing after Damien through the rows, his tiny hands clutching a basket too big for him. The way he'd looked up at his father like he hung the moon. The memory evaporated as he spat. You bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? The locksmith straightened, wrench in hand. I waved him off. I know exactly what I've done, I said, stepping onto the porch. The deed was in my back pocket, a physical weight. I protected what your father built. Arthur's laugh was jagged. From who? Your own children. From vultures. I nodded at his Tesla. How much was your bonus last year, Arthur? Enough to buy that car? Enough to bribe a notary? His face went ashen. The DA found her. I lied smoothly. She's flipping on you and Platinum Acres to avoid jail time. A masterstroke Robert had suggested. They're snakes, he'd said. Turn them against each other. It worked. Arthur's phone clattered to the flagstones. Mom, I can fix this. The sun was high now, bleaching the color from everything. I studied my son, the perfect part in his hair, the monogrammed cuffs, the way his left eye twitched like it had when he lied about breaking the greenhouse window at 12. No, I said softly. You can't. Then I turned and walked back into the house Damien built, shutting the door on the past. 1 year later, the desert had a way of erasing things. Footsteps in the sand, tire tracks on back roads, the names people gave you. The sign above the tasting room door no longer read Emmett Family Vineyards. The new letters, hand-carved from reclaimed barnwood by the Lopez boys, declared, Miles Emmett Organic Farms. I sat on the porch in Damien's rocking chair, the one I'd sanded and re-oiled last winter when the silence of the house grew too heavy. Below me, a busload of tourists from Phoenix sipped our new drought-resistant white under strings of Edison bulbs. Lisa Adams, Martin's daughter and now my operations manager, moved between the tables with a pitcher of water, her laugh ringing clear as the glasses she carried. Mrs. Miles Emmett? A woman in a sun hat approached, holding out a bottle of our desert blush. Would you sign this? We read about you in Sunset magazine. I uncapped the Sharpie with my teeth. The arthritis in my hands had worsened, but I could still form the letters of the name I'd reclaimed. Florence Jean Miles Emmett. The article said you single-handedly stopped a corporate land grab, the woman gushed. I capped the pen. Had help. The truth was messier than magazines could print. The lawsuit had settled quietly. Platinum Acres paying triple damages to avoid admitting guilt. Robert Wilson's firm took their cut, the IRS took theirs, and the remainder went into 2 trusts. One for the vineyard's future, one for the Damien Emmett Agricultural Scholarship at UNR. The first recipient, a rancher's daughter named Sophia, started next month. My phone buzzed on the side table. Another unknown number, another plea. Mom, it's June. Can we talk? I deleted it, same as previous ones before. The 15th text had come last Christmas, a photo of a positive pregnancy test with "You'll want to know your grandchild." But the ultrasound she mailed 2 months later had a Las Vegas Urgent Cares watermark. The dates didn't match. Arthur hadn't contacted me at all. Not after the DA dropped the fraud charges in exchange for his testimony against Platinum Acres. Not after his firm quietly let him go. I only knew he'd moved to Seattle because Vincent's nephew saw his LinkedIn. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, I wondered if they hated me. Then I'd remember the look on Arthur's face as I shut the door. The way his mouth had twisted like he was 6 again, and I'd taken away his toy truck for throwing it at June. Some hurts don't heal. They scar. At sundown, I walked the rows with Pint, Ray's old border collie's puppy. The vines were heavy with fruit. Not the classic Cabernet we'd started with, but new hybrids bred for the warming climate. Damien would have grumbled about tradition, then stayed up all night researching rootstock. The artesian well gurgled in the distance, its pump now solar-powered. My 20 acres. My water. The heart of everything. Back at the house, I poured 2 fingers of our '09 Zinfandel, Damien's last good vintage, and carried it to the porch. The sky bled orange over the Sierra Nevadas, the same color as the dress I'd worn the day we signed the land deed. A car turned down the driveway. Not Arthur's Tesla or June's convertible, but Lisa's dusty pickup. She bounded up the steps with a package. FedEx came. Thought you'd want it. The return address was a Las Vegas law firm. Inside, on heavy bond paper, June Emmett Wright versus Arthur L. Emmett. Division of assets following irreconcilable differences. I sipped my wine. Sweet at first, then tannic. Lisa hovered. You okay? Beyond her, the vineyard stretched green and gold in the dying light. The tourists were gone, the tables wiped down. Somewhere in Reno, Sophia packed for college, her future bright with possibilities we'd carved from the wreckage. Never better, I said, and meant it. I left the papers unopened on the rail and rocked as the stars emerged. The same stars Damien and I had named our first vines after. Vega, Altair, Polaris. The phone buzzed once more. I didn't look. Some fires burned clean to the ground. The harvest moon hung low over the vineyard, casting long shadows across the picnic tables we'd set up between the rows. Tomorrow, we'd host the first Miles Emmett harvest dinner. Ray and his new wife bringing the smoked tri-tip, the Lopez boys stringing up lights, Lisa's homemade sangria already chilling in the steel tub Damien used for grape sorting. I rocked slowly in his chair, the one I'd rescued from the porch the day the locksmith came. That would grown the same way it had under his weight all those years. Buddy thumped his tail against my leg as I scratched behind his ears. My phone buzzed on the side table. Another unknown number. Another plea. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. Some fires burn so hot they leave nothing but glass behind. That's my story. Some of you will say I'm heartless. That no mother should turn her back on her children. You're welcome to that opinion. Just as you're welcome to try surviving betrayal from the souls you carried in your body, fed from your breast, loved more than your own breath. What Arthur and June did on County Road 27 wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, and choices have consequences. I made mine the day I walked out of Vincent's office with that deed in my hand. The day I chose justice over grief, dignity over delusion. The day I realized family isn't blood. It's the people who show up when your world burns down. So yes, I sit here most evenings watching the stars pierce the desert sky, Damien's old wool blanket across my knees. The vineyard thrives. The scholarship fund grows. And every time I pour a glass of our new Desert Resilience blend, I toast the man who taught me real love doesn't mean endless forgiveness. It means having the strength to say enough. Some wounds don't heal. They become part of you, like the scar on my hip from June's emergency C-section, like the calluses on my palms from 40 years of pruning. But scars mean you survived. And I not only survived, I won. Now tell me in the comments, could you cut off your own children if they did this? What's harder, forgiveness or justice? What's one line from this story that stuck with you? Don't forget to subscribe. This channel isn't just about stories, it's about truth. And the truth? Some people mistake kindness for weakness, until they're left choking on its dust.